Welcome back, everybody. We are speaking with Dr. Majid Sadeghpour, who is a human rights activist. He's the political director for the Organization of Iranian American Communities. And he survived the revolution in 1979 in Iran when the Shah fell from power. What do you remember about that revolution? You were there. How did it start?
Yes, I was not even a teenager. I was 11 years old. Joy?
It started out with joy?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. That the Shah of Iran was gone was celebrated by an entire nation.
Why did people, what was the event that sparked this effort to get rid of the Shah? Was there an event, or was there just a series of events? What happened? How did you know that he was on his way out?
I think you need to go back to how he came to power. He came to power through a coup d'etat. Mm-hmm. And shortly thereafter began creating the secret police, Savak, and the prisons that I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. And in order to remain in power, he persecuted secular voices in society. Many people disappeared, others were assassinated, writers, poets, artists, intellectuals were imprisoned and killed. And so the network of protests, including the MEK, for example, was formed in those years.
MEK is what?
MEK, People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. Mm-hmm. And that is just one of a number of organizations that were secular in their political viewpoints. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted a ballot box to be the measure of legitimacy. And the Shah certainly represented foreign power over Iran and represented unelected rule. And so their effort was highly persecuted in Iran. And those killings resonated within the population. And so the networks of opposition against the regime in Iran, the Shah, continued to grow through my childhood years. I remember the protests slightly growing, and there was a turning point where President Carter actually invited Shah here to the White House. Mm-hmm. And there were student protests outside the White House. I remember on Iranian TV as a child watching Shah tear come out, and I asked my parents, why was he crying? And they said, no, it's tear gas. Nobody told me at the time what tear gas was, why that was, but it was because they wanted those protesters to leave outside the White House. But that said, President Carter comes back to Iran, and actually they raised a glass at the ceremony, and he's recorded as saying Iran is an island of stability in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. I remember that dinner being broadcast on national television. But shortly thereafter, in my lifetime, it was probably a tenth of my life, a little bit over a year, the Shah in Iran was gone. And what happened was the President Carter come back to Iran. There was this pivotal moment, the Jaleh Square massacre, the Black Friday, where in a square in Tehran, there were peaceful protests, unarmed protests, and against the Shah, and opened fire. I have on my desktop, on my computer, that picture as a continuous reminder of Iranian people's struggle against single-party rule, where piles of people are on top of one another with soldiers shooting at them. That's a vivid picture. That and others, and executions, publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, starting writing about Iran's torture chambers and the killings. And so President Carter really pressured Shah to stop these persecutions, at least in the open. Certainly, the child going to protests, witnessed that. Mm-hmm. I saw the protests getting much bigger. I saw, instead of hearing the bullets, I never got shot at, but I would hear the bullets, but it was no longer the bullets, but just police running around with batons, mm-hmm. chasing protesters, which mm-hmm. wouldn't scare them, and tear gas at most. And so sooner or later, those protests continued to grow and grow and grow. And there was that one instant that it overwhelmed the Shah, and he essentially had to leave Iran, and the regime fell. That's a lesson that the Ayatollahs have learned really well. The killings that occurred in January and in the years past, that occurred in the protests in Iran, do demonstrate that this regime, one, has learned the lesson, and it will not stop killing, because that's the only way it can stay in power. And
they will not stop killing.
That's correct. And two, that it is less susceptible, not Not that it is indispensable in these efforts, but it is less susceptible to foreign influence in its oppression of the Iranian people. i.e., it's not one singular individual abroad that can tell it to stop killing, but it does stop. So that complicates the matters. That means that the change cannot occur from outside of Iran. It has to occur inside Iran. That means that the network of resistance of Iran needs to be strong enough to survive and build and finally overwhelm the regime. And that also means that the international community has a key role to play, not to alternate their efforts.
How is it that the Shah did not survive a massacre of Iranians?
Yes.
And the current regime of the Ayatollahs has survived a massacre of Iranians?
Excellent question. The regime in Iran recognized early on, I'm talking about the very time that they killed, before they killed my brother, at the time when they arrested my brother in 1981, they realized they lacked true political legitimacy.
Who?
The Ayatollahs.
The Ayatollahs. Okay.
In order to maintain and be able to kill the Iranian people and remain in power and consolidate power, they needed a number of things. So their strategy was multifold. Oppression inside Iran, create the IRGC, create the Quds Force out for operation.
The which force?
Quds Force or the Jerusalem Force. Qasem Soleimani was the chief of Quds Force for a long, long time. So then create a terrorist infrastructure outside of Iran that creates problems for the free world. You see the Hezbollahs of the world and operations, the terrorist operations that have been occurring across the globe that Iran has sponsored, the number one state sponsor of terrorism. And third, build weapons of mass destruction, and so that it can actually utilize them when it needs to. What all of that collectively would do is to, one, keep the population at bay, two, keep the international community from being able to interfere when it does kill the Iranian people. And that is exactly how this is playing out. So what we have done, the free world has done, has tried to follow a path, two paths, in fact, so far. One has been pursue negotiations with the regime, i.e. appeasement, and looking the other way where all these killings are occurring, so that we can hopefully change the regime's behavior, meaning that it actually becomes a legitimate international actor. And that has failed. It will fail for the reason I will tell you later. The second approach, which we have also tried, which is to actually intimidate and kill and bomb its leadership or its resources, those very weapons of mass destruction, so that we can contain its behavior. The problem is that the core of the regime has been left intact. The regime is a fascist, fundamentalist, predatory machine.
What is the core, though?
The core is a highly fascist, fundamentalist, misogynist infrastructure.
But these have to be people at the end of the day, right?
They are. They are. But they're pervasive. We began talking about that network that was built at the very earliest stages, the very people who gave away my brother's name. That infrastructure of, what is the correct word for it? It's very pervasive, systemic. People's livelihood depends on it. People's survival depends on it. And so the state uses executions and persecutions as a tool of survival. It doesn't use it as a form of justice. And so in this environment, the free world has actually played into the Ayatollah's hands.
How so?
Well, it has kind of batted flies, but left the actual nest alone. The nest is the regime itself, its core ideology. And the ideology cannot be destroyed with bombs from abroad, nor with trying to argue them to change their opinion.